They bought it for $12,000 at a county auction, an estate everyone called cursed, worthless, buried under 40 years of snow and shame. But when Merritt and Delphine, both in their 70s and barely surviving on canned soup and burning furniture to stay warm, finally broke through a frozen steel door in the basement they never knew existed, what they found hidden beneath the ice and stone would silence an entire town and reveal a $275 million secret their family had protected since 1927. Before we dive into the story, make sure to smash subscribe, because tomorrow we have an extra special story for you that will blow your mind. The wind screamed down from the Rockies like a living thing, howling through the pines and battering against the stone walls of the estate that sat alone on the ridge above Pine Ridge, Colorado. The town itself, population 312 and dropping, huddled in the valley below, its main street lined with boarded-up shops and faded paint. It was the kind of place people left and never came back to, where the young ones fled to Denver or beyond, chasing jobs and warmth and futures that didn't involve watching everything slowly die. But up on the ridge, in the massive stone mansion that locals called the Haunted Castle, Merritt and Delphine stayed. They had nowhere else to go. Merritt was 73, his hands gnarled from decades of ranch work before his back gave out. Delphine was 71, her heart condition worsening with each passing winter, the medication they could barely afford keeping her alive 1 month at a time. They lived in a house with 20 rooms and could only afford to heat 2 of them. The estate had been built in 1927 by Merritt's grandfather, Thaddeus, a man he'd only met twice as a child. Thaddeus had been wealthy once, or so the family stories went, made his fortune in mining and timber before the Depression hit. But he died suddenly in 1968, leaving the property to Merritt's father, who'd never wanted it. The house had passed through the family like a burden no one knew how to carry, too expensive to maintain, too remote to sell, too proud to abandon. When Merritt inherited it 47 years ago, newly married to Delphine and full of hope, they'd thought they could make something of it. Maybe turn it into a bed and breakfast, or sell parcels of the 42 acres. But the land was too steep, too isolated, and the house too deteriorated. The roof leaked. The plumbing froze every winter. The electrical system was a fire hazard. Contractors took one look and tripled their estimates, so they'd stayed, watching their dreams shrink room by room, year by year, until all that remained was survival. Merritt's pension from 30 years at the lumber mill brought in $900 a month. Social Security added another $1,300 combined. Delphine's heart medication cost $420 every refill. Property taxes, even on a house the county had valued at only $12,000, still demanded $1,800 annually. Heating oil, when they could afford it, ran $200 a month in winter. The math never worked. It had never worked. The townspeople knew their situation. How could they not? Everyone in Pine Ridge knew everyone else's business. At the general store, Merritt paid in carefully counted bills and coins. At the pharmacy, Delphine asked about generic alternatives and payment plans. The younger folks felt pity. The older ones felt something closer to schadenfreude. There were whispers, always whispers. Those fools living in that mansion like they're royalty, too proud to move into assisted living where they belong. That house should have been torn down decades ago. I heard they're burning antique furniture just to stay warm. That last one was true. Last winter, Merritt had chopped up a 19th century writing desk because they'd run out of firewood and the oil tank was empty. Delphine had cried watching it burn, not because of its value, which they didn't know, but because it had belonged to someone who'd once had enough. Enough warmth, enough food, enough hope. Their adult children, 2 sons and a daughter scattered across Oregon and Texas, called every few weeks with the same speech. Mum, Dad, you can't keep living like this. Sell the place. Move into a facility. We'll help you find something nice. But nice meant small. Nice meant giving up. Nice meant admitting that the last 47 years had been for nothing. So they stayed, two elderly people alone in a decaying mansion, surviving on stubbornness and soup. January hit Pine Ridge like a fist. The National Weather Service issued warnings about a historic winter storm system moving down from Canada, temperatures dropping to 30 below zero, wind chills dangerous enough to cause frostbite in minutes. The forecast predicted snow accumulation between 18 and 30 inches, possibly more at higher elevations. Merritt spent the day before the storm preparing as best he could. He stacked what little firewood remained near the back door. He filled every container they owned with water from the well before the pipes froze. He moved their mattress into the kitchen, the only room they could keep consistently warm with the wood stove. Delphine cooked a large pot of vegetable soup, enough to last them a week if they rationed carefully. The storm hit on a Tuesday night. Merritt woke to the sound of wind tearing at the roof shingles, a noise like giants ripping cardboard. Through the kitchen window, he couldn't see anything but white. The snow didn't fall so much as a tack, horizontal sheets of it slamming against the glass. By morning, the world had vanished. They lost power at 6 a.m., the lights flickered twice, then died. The electric heater they'd been using in the bathroom went silent. The refrigerator stopped humming. The house, already cold, began its descent into something deeper. Merritt checked his phone. No signal. The landline was dead. They were cut off completely. "How bad is it?" Delphine asked from beneath 3 quilts on the mattress. Merritt looked out the kitchen window. Snow had drifted halfway up the first-floor windows. The pines surrounding the property bent under the weight of ice, some snapping with cracks that sounded like gunshots. The road, already barely maintained, would be impassable for days, maybe weeks. "We'll be fine," he lied gently. "Storm'll blow through." But it didn't blow through. It settled in like it owned the place. For 3 days, the snow fell without stopping. Merritt kept the wood stove burning, rationing their supply, watching it dwindle. They ate soup twice a day, small portions, trying to make it last. Delphine's lips started turning blue at night, despite the layers of clothing she wore. Her breathing sounded wrong, shallow and raspy. On the 4th day, Merritt woke to silence. The wind had finally stopped. The house groaned and settled around them, adjusting to the weight of all that frozen water. He got up, his joints screaming, and looked outside. The estate was buried. Drifts 20 feet high surrounded the house like walls. The garage was completely covered. His truck, parked near the back door, was nothing but a snow-covered lump. They were trapped. Truly trapped. "Merritt," Delphine's voice was weak. "I'm cold, I can't get warm." He looked at the wood stove. They had maybe 2 days of firewood left. After that, they'd have to start burning furniture again, assuming they had the strength to break it apart. He looked around the kitchen with new eyes, cataloguing what could burn. The chairs, the table, the cabinet doors. "I'm going to find us more wood," he said. "There isn't any more." "There's always more. This house is full of old things." He left her by the stove and ventured deeper into the frozen mansion. Most of the rooms hadn't been opened in years. Ice crystals decorated the inside of the windows. His breath came out in clouds so thick he could barely see. He moved through the parlor, the library, the dining room, looking for anything that would burn. Nothing. They'd already taken everything valuable or useful from these spaces years ago. He descended to the basement, a place he normally avoided. It was a maze of stone corridors and chambers built into the hillside, cold as a tomb even in summer. The stairs creaked under his weight. His flashlight beam, weak from dying batteries, cut through the darkness. The basement had always unsettled him. Too many shadows, too many corners that seemed to watch. His grandfather Thaddeus had spent a lot of time down here, or so Merritt's father had said. Doing what? No one knew. After Thaddeus died, the family had cleaned out the obvious things, tools and equipment and supplies, but left the rest untouched. It felt wrong somehow, disturbing a dead man's space. Merritt moved through the main chamber, past the ancient coal furnace that hadn't worked in 30 years, past shelves of old paint cans and rusted tools. He was looking for wooden crates, anything that would burn. That's when he noticed something. The sound was different. He stopped, listening. The basement had a certain acoustic quality, damp and heavy. But near the back wall, behind a pile of coal bins that hadn't been moved in decades, something sounded hollow. He knocked on the stone wall. Solid. Knocked again 2 feet to the left. Hollow. His heart started beating faster. He began moving the coal bins, the effort making him wheeze. They were heavy, even empty, and his back protested every movement. But he kept going, driven by curiosity and something deeper, a feeling he couldn't name. Behind the bins, barely visible beneath decades of grime and cobwebs, was a steel door. Merritt stared at it. He'd lived in this house for 47 years. He'd been in this basement hundreds of times. How had he never seen this door? He brushed away the dirt with his gloved hand, revealing more of the surface. The steel was thick, industrial grade, the kind you'd see on a bank vault. There was a sophisticated lock mechanism, frozen solid, and beside it, a small bronze plaque so tarnished he could barely read it. He leaned closer, squinting in the flashlight beam. The plaque read, "Providence Vault, established 1927, for the preservation of that which must endure. 1927, the year his grandfather built the house." Merritt's hands trembled, though whether from cold or adrenaline he couldn't tell. He tried the door. It didn't budge. The lock was seized up, frozen by decades of basement moisture. He looked at the mechanism more closely. It required 2 keys, not one, each fitting into separate cylinders. He'd never seen keys like this, never even heard his father mention a vault. He stood there in the frozen darkness, staring at the door, his mind racing. Then he remembered something. Years ago, when they'd first moved in, Delphine had been going through boxes of family items left in the attic. Most of it had been junk, old clothes and papers and broken furniture. But there'd been a hat box, cream-colored with water stains, filled with odds and ends. Costume jewelry, buttons, a few old photographs, and a key ring. A strange key ring with keys that looked too ornate, too official to be for a house. Delphine had asked him what they were for. He'd said he didn't know, figured they were for buildings Thaddeus had owned or places long gone. They'd put the hat box back in the attic and forgotten about it. Until now. Merritt climbed the stairs faster than he should have, his lungs burning. Delphine looked up in alarm when he burst into the kitchen. "What's wrong?" "That hat box," he gasped. "The one from the attic with the keys." "Merritt, what? Do you remember where we put it?" She thought for a moment. "Hall closet, I think. Top shelf. We moved it down a few years ago when we stopped going up to the attic." "Why?" He was already moving. The hall closet was packed with things they couldn't bear to throw away, but had no use for. He pulled down boxes, his hands clumsy in their gloves, until he found it. The cream-colored hat box, water-stained and bent exactly as he remembered. Inside, beneath a tangle of broken necklaces and old buttons, was the key ring. He held it up to the light. 2 keys, both made of brass, both ornate with unusual teeth patterns. They looked old, important, exactly the kind of keys that might fit a vault door hidden in a basement. "Merritt," Delphine had followed him into the hall. "What did you find?" "A door, in the basement, behind the coal bins. I've never seen it before." "A door to what?" "I don't know, but these might open it." They looked at each other. Delphine was shivering despite the 3 sweaters she wore. Her lips had that blue tinge again. They were running out of time, out of warmth, out of options. Whatever was behind that door, it couldn't make their situation worse. "Can you make it down the stairs?" he asked. "If you help me." It took them 20 minutes to descend to the basement, Delphine leaning heavily on his arm, both of them stopping to rest every few steps. The cold down here was absolute, the kind that made your bones ache. Merritt's flashlight was dying, the beam growing dimmer. He led her to the back wall, to the space he'd cleared. "Oh my God," Delphine whispered when she saw the door. "How did we never know this was here?" "Your guess is as good as mine." Merritt approached the lock mechanism with the first key. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely fit it into the cylinder. The key slid in, perfect fit, but it wouldn't turn. The lock was frozen solid from decades of moisture. "It's stuck. Try the other one." He did. Same result. Both keys fit perfectly, but neither would turn. "We need to warm it up somehow," Delphine said. "Melt the ice in the mechanism." "With what?" she thought. "Candle. We have those emergency candles in the kitchen." Merritt retrieved one, lit it, and began carefully heating the lock mechanism. It was slow work. The flame was tiny, the metal was thick, but gradually he started to hear something, dripping. The ice inside was melting. After what felt like an hour, he tried the first key again. This time, with tremendous effort, it turned. A deep click echoed through the basement. He tried the second key. Another click, louder this time, mechanical and final. Merritt and Delphine looked at each other. 47 years in this house. 47 years of struggling and surviving. And now, in their darkest moment, they stood before a door they'd never known existed. "Are you ready?" he asked. Delphine nodded, her hand finding his. Merritt gripped the door handle and pulled. Nothing. He pulled harder. The door groaned, metal scraping against stone, and then, with a hiss of escaping air, it opened. Behind it was not a room but a passage, a narrow corridor descending deeper into the hillside, lit by emergency lights that flickered to life as air rushed in. The lights were dim, running on some backup power source, but they were enough to see by. "There's electricity down there," Delphine whispered. "But how? The house is dead." "Independent system, maybe." They stepped into the passage. The temperature was different here, warmer, controlled. The walls were smooth stone, precisely cut. The floor was concrete, clean, no dust or debris. Someone had built this to last. The passage ran for 30 feet before opening into a larger space. As they emerged, more lights flickered on, revealing a chamber that took their breath away. It was a vault. A proper vault, with climate control systems humming softly, dehumidifiers running, temperature gauges on the walls reading a steady 55 degrees. The room was perhaps 40 feet by 30 feet, with high ceilings and ventilation ducts leading up through the rock. But it was what filled the room that made Merritt's knees go weak. Wooden crates, dozens of them, maybe 100, stacked neatly along the walls, arranged by size, each one labeled with careful handwriting. Dates ranging from 1932 to 1967. Names of cities: New York, Paris, Berlin, Prague, Amsterdam, numbers that might have been inventory codes. In the center of the room stood a desk, not old or decrepit, but preserved, perfect, as if someone had just stepped away from it. On the desk sat a leather-bound journal, a fountain pen, and a pair of reading glasses. Delphine moved toward the desk while Merritt approached the nearest crate. His hands trembled as he read the label. New York, 1934, Series 12, Fragile, Providence Collection. "Merritt?" Delphine's voice was shaking. "Come look at this." She'd opened the journal. The first page, written in elegant script, read, "Providence Vault, established by Thaddeus Merritt Whitcomb for the preservation and protection of that which the world would otherwise lose. May those who find this understand what I could not say in life. Some treasures are meant to wait." Merritt stood beside his wife, reading over her shoulder. The next pages contained an index, a meticulous catalogue of everything in the vault: paintings, sculptures, manuscripts, rare books, historical documents, artifacts. Each entry included an acquisition date, a description, and an estimated value. The numbers made no sense. They had to be wrong. A painting valued at $200,000, a sculpture at $150,000, a manuscript at $300,000. Page after page of impossible numbers. "This can't be real," Merritt whispered. "Look at the dates. He was collecting during the Depression, during the war." Merritt flipped through more pages. He found journal entries mixed with the inventory, his grandfather's private thoughts. One entry from 1933 read, "Purchase the Johnson collection today. The family is desperate, facing foreclosure. I paid them fair market value, though I could have gotten it for half." Sarah Johnson wept when I told her the paintings would be preserved, not sold off to private collectors who would hide them away. She said, "At least someone will remember we were here. This is why I do this, not for profit, but for memory." Another from 1943. "Received a shipment from Amsterdam via the underground network. Jewish families fleeing the Nazis, smuggling out what they can. Art, documents, family heirlooms. They entrust these treasures to me because they have no other choice. I will keep them safe until this madness ends, if it ever does." Delphine's hands covered her mouth. Tears ran down her cheeks. He was saving things, protecting them. But why hide them? Why not donate them to museums? She turned more pages, found an entry from 1967, the writing shakier, older. "I am dying. The doctors give me months at most. I have tried to explain this collection to my son, but he thinks I'm senile, imagining wealth that doesn't exist. He wants me to go to a nursing home, to let go of this worthless estate. He doesn't understand. No one does. So I will seal the vault and trust that someday, when the time is right, someone will find it, someone who needs it, someone who will understand what it means to preserve beauty in a world that only values profit." Merritt's throat felt tight. He left this for us, for whoever stayed. "Look at the last page." Delphine turned to the end of the journal. The final entry was dated March 5, 1968, 3 weeks before Thaddeus died. "To whoever opens this door, you have found something the world declared worthless, just as they declared you worthless for staying in this forgotten place. But worth is not determined by what others see. It is determined by what endures. Everything in this vault endured because I believed it should. Now it is yours, not to hide, not to hoard, but to use as Providence directs. Trust yourself. Trust the process. And remember, the greatest wealth is not what we possess, but what we preserve for others." Thaddeus Merritt Whitcomb. They stood in silence, the weight of it settling over them like snow. Somewhere above them, the storm had ended. The house was frozen and dark. They were two elderly people, poor and forgotten, barely surviving. But beneath their feet was something else, something that had waited 97 years to be found. Merritt moved to the nearest crate. It was marked, "New York, 1935, painting, authenticated." "Should we open it?" he asked. Delphine nodded, unable to speak. He found a crowbar hanging on the wall, probably placed there by Thaddeus for exactly this purpose. The nails gave way easily, the wood still strong despite the decades. Merritt lifted the lid. Inside, wrapped in layers of protective cloth, was a painting. He removed it carefully, his hands steadier now, and turned it toward the light. The painting depicted a woman in a blue dress sitting by a window reading a letter. The style was instantly recognizable even to Merritt's untrained eye. Impressionist. Late 19th century. The colors were vibrant, the brushwork masterful. In the bottom right corner, a signature, Vermeer. Delphine gasped. "That's not possible." "What?" "Vermeer, Dutch master, 17th century. His paintings are Merritt. They're worth millions, tens of millions." "How do you know that?" "I used to watch those antiques shows, before we couldn't afford cable." Merritt looked at the painting in his hands, then at the 100 other crates lining the walls. His heart started pounding so hard he thought it might burst. "Delphine," he said quietly, "what if they're all like this?" She looked around the vault, at the careful labels, at the climate control systems still running after all these years. at the journal filled with acquisition notes and authentication records. "Then we're not poor anymore," she whispered. They stood together in that hidden chamber, two people who'd spent 47 years being told they had nothing, holding a painting worth more than everything they'd owned in their entire lives combined. The storm outside had buried them in snow. But down here, beneath the frozen earth, they'd found something that would change everything. Merritt gently rewrapped the painting and placed it back in its crate. Then he looked at his wife, really looked at her. Her blue-tinged lips, her shallow breathing, the way she swayed slightly, even standing still. "We need to get you warm," he said, "but the collection has waited 97 years. It can wait one more day." They made their way back through the passage, through the steel door, up the basement stairs. Merritt helped Delphine to the kitchen, added wood to the stove, wrapped her in every blanket they owned. But his mind was racing. They had no phone, no way to contact anyone. Even if they did, who would they call? Who could they trust? And the most terrifying question of all, if word got out about what they'd found, would they survive long enough to do anything about it? Outside, the snow lay heavy and silent. Pine Ridge slept, unaware that the two people they'd mocked for decades had just discovered the most valuable private collection in American history. The couple everyone called fools had just become the guardians of $275 million in lost art and artifacts, and they had absolutely no idea what to do next. Merritt didn't sleep that night. He sat beside Delphine as she drifted in and out of consciousness, her breathing ragged, her skin pale as the snow outside. The wood stove crackled, throwing shadows across the kitchen walls, but his mind was elsewhere, down in that vault, surrounded by crates that held secrets his grandfather had died protecting. When dawn finally came, grey and cold, Delphine's eyes fluttered open. She looked at him with surprising clarity. "We need to go back down there," she whispered. "You need to rest." "Merritt, we don't have time for rest. If that collection is real, if those pieces are authentic, we need to know what we're dealing with before we tell anyone." She was right. He helped her sit up, fed her warm soup, gave her the heart medication, even though they were down to their last week's supply. Then, when she insisted she could move, they descended to the basement again. This time they brought better lights, notepads, and a camera Merritt had found in a drawer, an old digital one from 2008 that still held a charge. They spent the morning opening crates, one after another, documenting what they found. The second crate held a sculpture, bronze, depicting a dancer mid-leap. The label read Degas, 1887, authenticated Paris. The third contained books, first editions, some so old the pages crumbled at the edges. A Gutenberg Bible fragment, a handwritten manuscript by Dickens, a collection of letters between Adams and Jefferson. The fourth held more paintings, a Monet, a Renoir, a Cézanne, each one carefully preserved, wrapped in archival materials, protected from light and moisture. By noon, they'd opened 20 crates. Merritt's hands shook as he wrote down each item. The numbers in Thaddeus's journal were starting to make terrible, wonderful sense. These weren't exaggerations or delusions. They were conservative estimates. Delphine sat at the desk, reading through the journal more carefully, piecing together their grandfather's story. "Merritt, listen to this," she said, her voice stronger now, animated by discovery. "He wrote this in 1934. Met with the Harrison family today. They're losing their estate to the bank. Rather than let their art collection be auctioned off to the highest bidder, they asked if I would purchase it privately. I paid them $60,000, twice what the bank offered. Mrs. Harrison said the money would let them start over in California. I told her the paintings would be preserved until the world was ready to appreciate them again. She didn't understand what I meant. Few do." "He was buying things from desperate people during the Depression," Merritt said, "but paying them fairly. Look at this entry from 1936. Received word that the Mitchell collection sold at auction for $32,000. The family got nothing. The bank took it all. This is why I work in secret. If the banks knew what I was doing, they would try to stop me. They want profit, not preservation. Merritt opened another crate. Inside was a collection of ancient artifacts, Greek pottery, Roman coins, Egyptian jewelry. Each piece was catalogued with acquisition details and historical significance. He wasn't just collecting art, Merritt said. He was saving history. Delphine turned to entries from the 1940s. Her voice changed, became heavier as she read aloud. June 1942. The network contacted me again. More families fleeing Europe. They're smuggling out what they can before the Nazis take everything. I've arranged transport through Lisbon. The pieces will arrive in 3 shipments over the next 6 months. I don't know if the families will survive, but at least part of their heritage will. September 1943. Received confirmation that the Goldstein family perished at Auschwitz. The Torah scroll and menorah they sent me are all that remains of 300 years of their history. I have placed them in the vault with a plaque bearing their names. May their memory be a blessing. Delphine's voice broke. Tears ran down her cheeks. Merritt, he wasn't just a collector. He was a protector. He saved these things when no one else would. They spent hours reading through the journal, understanding Thaddeus in a way neither of them had ever imagined possible. He'd been wealthy, yes, from mining and timber, but he'd used that wealth quietly, secretly, to preserve what others dismissed or destroyed. He'd paid fair prices during the Depression when everyone else exploited desperation. He'd risked federal prosecution to smuggle art out of Nazi-occupied Europe. He'd spent 40 years building this collection, not for profit, but for posterity. And then, in 1967, when the cancer diagnosis came, he'd tried to explain it to his son, Merritt's father. But his father hadn't believed him, thought the old man was senile, inventing stories of hidden treasure to avoid facing death. One entry from December 1967 cut deep. My son visited today with his wife and boy. Little Merritt, barely 6 years old, so full of life. I tried again to tell them about the vault, about what I've built here. My son patted my hand and said, "It's okay, Dad. You don't need to worry about money anymore." He thinks I'm rambling. He's already talking about selling the estate after I'm gone, moving his family somewhere warm. I wanted to show them, to take them down to the vault, but something stopped me. If they saw it now, they would sell it all, divide it up, destroy what took a lifetime to build. So, I will seal it, and I will trust that Providence will reveal it when the time is right, when someone worthy finds it. We were supposed to find this, Delphine whispered. Not when we were young and ambitious, not when we could have profited from it, but now, when we're old and broken and everyone thinks we're worthless. Merritt looked around the vault with new eyes. 47 years they'd lived above this chamber, struggling and suffering, never knowing it was here. 47 years of being mocked and pitied, and all along beneath their feet was proof that worth had nothing to do with what the world could see. They continued cataloguing. By evening, they'd opened 40 crates. The conservative estimate of value had reached $80 million, and they weren't even halfway through. That's when Delphine collapsed. One moment she was unwrapping a small painting, the next she was on the concrete floor, her face grey, her lips blue, her chest heaving as she struggled to breathe. "Delphine!" Merritt dropped to his knees beside her. "Delphine, stay with me!" Her eyes rolled back. Her breathing became shallow, irregular. He recognized the signs. Her heart. It was giving out. Panic seized him. They were miles from town, buried under 20 feet of snow, with no phone, no way to call for help. He was watching his wife die, and there was nothing he could do. "No," he said through gritted teeth. "No, you don't get to leave me. Not now, not like this." He gathered her in his arms, her body so light it terrified him, and carried her up the stairs. Each step was agony. His back screamed, his knees threatened to buckle, but he kept moving, driven by love and desperation. He laid her on the mattress in the kitchen, wrapped her in blankets, checked her pulse. Weak but present. Her breathing was terrible, wet and rattling. She needed a hospital. She needed help he couldn't give her. Merritt looked out the window. The sun was setting, turning the snow pink and gold. The road was still impassable. Even if he could get to his truck, which was buried, he'd never make it to town. But maybe someone could make it to them. He remembered that the county sometimes sent search and rescue teams after major storms, checking on elderly residents in remote areas. It was a long shot, but it was all he had. Merritt went to the front porch where the snow had drifted against the door. He forced it open, the cold hitting him like a wall. He found the emergency flare kit he kept in the hall closet, old and probably expired, but worth trying. He fired 3 flares into the darkening sky, the red light brilliant against the white landscape. Then he went back inside, added wood to the stove, and sat beside his wife, holding her hand, praying to a God he wasn't sure he believed in anymore. "Stay with me," he whispered. "Please, Delphine, we just found it. We just found what he left us. You have to stay to see what we do with it." An hour passed, then 2. Delphine's breathing didn't improve. Merritt was preparing himself for the worst when he heard it. An engine, distant but growing closer. He rushed to the window, headlights cutting through the darkness, moving slowly up the buried road. A vehicle with a plow attachment pushing through the drifts. Search and rescue. They'd seen the flares. Merritt stumbled to the front door, waving, shouting. The vehicle, a heavy-duty pickup with emergency lights, pulled up as close as it could. A figure jumped out, carrying medical equipment. "Sir, are you injured?" The voice was young, male, urgent. "My wife," Merritt gasped. "Her heart. She's in the kitchen." The paramedic followed him inside. He was maybe 30, with dark hair and steady hands. His jacket read Pine Ridge Emergency Services, and his name tag said Soren. Soren moved quickly, professionally. He checked Delphine's vitals, started oxygen, asked Merritt rapid-fire questions about her medical history, her medications, when the episode started. "She needs a hospital," Soren said, "but the roads are still bad. I can stabilize her here and call for a helicopter evac at first light if the weather clears." "Do whatever you need to do," Merritt said. "Please." Soren worked for the next hour, administering medication, monitoring her heart rhythm, keeping her stable. Gradually, slowly, Delphine's color improved. Her breathing steadied. She opened her eyes. "Merritt?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "I'm here. You're okay. Help came." She looked at Soren with confusion, then recognition. "The paramedic from town. I've seen you at the pharmacy." "Yes, ma'am," Soren said gently. "I'm going to take good care of you, but I need you to rest now." As Delphine drifted into medicated sleep, Soren sat back, wiping sweat from his forehead despite the cold. He looked around the kitchen, taking in the makeshift living situation, the wood stove, the obvious poverty. "How long have you two been living like this?" he asked quietly. "Long enough," Merritt said. "The county should have checked on you sooner. This storm was predicted. They should have evacuated vulnerable residents. We didn't want to leave." Soren nodded, not judging. He began repacking his equipment. That's when he noticed the stairs leading down to the basement and something else. Merritt's boots, covered in concrete dust. The flashlight on the counter, still warm. The old camera sitting beside it. "Were you working on something down there?" Soren asked casually. Merritt's blood went cold. He'd been so panicked about Delphine, he hadn't thought to hide the evidence of their discovery. "Just, looking for firewood," he said, the lie obvious even to his own ears. Soren looked at him for a long moment. Then he stood, walked to the basement door, and looked down the stairs. He could see the light, faint but present, coming from the passage below. "That's not firewood light," he said. Merritt's heart raced. This was it. The moment where their secret became someone else's knowledge, where control of the situation slipped from their hands. "Please," Merritt said, "don't go down there." Soren turned, his expression unreadable. "Why not?" "Because what's down there, it's complicated. It's dangerous. If word gets out—" "I'm not here to cause you trouble, Mr. Merritt. I'm here to help. But if there's something down there that could affect your safety or your wife's health, I need to know." They stared at each other. Merritt saw genuine concern in the young man's eyes, not greed or manipulation. He thought about Thaddeus's final journal entry, about trusting Providence, about waiting for the right person. He made a decision that would change everything. "If I show you," Merritt said slowly, "you have to swear you won't tell anyone. Not yet. Not until we figure out what to do." "That depends on what it is." "Swear it." Soren hesitated, then nodded. "I swear." Merritt led him down the stairs, through the basement, past the coal bins, to the steel door standing open. Soren's eyes widened when he saw it. "What is this?" "My grandfather's legacy. He built it in 1927. We just found it yesterday." They stepped into the passage. Soren's mouth fell open when he saw the vault, the climate control systems, the rows of crates. "Holy hell," he breathed. "It's an art collection. Artifacts, paintings, historical documents, things my grandfather saved during the Depression and the war." Soren walked slowly into the chamber, his professional composure cracking. He moved to one of the open crates, looked inside at the Monet sitting there, and actually staggered back. "This is real?" "We think so. Everything's documented in that journal." Soren picked up the leather-bound book with trembling hands. He read the first few pages, then looked up at Merritt with something like awe. "Do you have any idea what this is worth?" "The journal says over $18 million in 1965 dollars. We're guessing in today's market, maybe more." "Maybe more," Soren repeated faintly. "Mr. Merritt, some of these pieces, they're not just valuable, they're historically significant. Museums have been looking for some of these items for decades. What happens next will test everything this couple thought they knew about trust, legacy, and survival. The discovery that was supposed to save them might destroy them instead. Stay tuned to see what happens next. If you're enjoying the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more." Merritt sat down heavily on an old crate. "What do we do?" Soren paced the vault, his mind clearly racing. He stopped in front of a crate marked Amsterdam, 1943, Goldstein family, Sacred Trust. "My grandmother," he said quietly. "She was an art history professor at Boulder before she retired. She specialized in lost art from World War II. She used to tell me stories about pieces that disappeared, families that were destroyed, heritage that was erased." He turned to Merritt, his eyes intense. "If even a fraction of this collection is from that era, if your grandfather helped save it from the Nazis, this isn't just valuable, it's sacred. Your grandmother, could she help us authenticate things?" "Maybe. But Mr. Merritt, you need to understand something. The moment this becomes public, your life will never be the same. People will come out of the woodwork claiming ownership, demanding shares. Governments might get involved, lawyers will circle like sharks." "So we should just keep it hidden?" "I'm not saying that. I'm saying you need to be careful. You need protection. Legal, physical, maybe both." Merritt thought about the men in suits he'd seen in town lately, strangers asking questions about the estate, about property records. He'd assumed they were developers, scavengers looking to buy up cheap land. But what if they knew something? What if word had already leaked somehow? "There's something else," Merritt said. "We've been getting strange calls lately, even before the storm. No one on the line, just breathing. And our property was reassessed last month. Suddenly went from $12,000 to $50,000. The tax bill nearly gave Delphine a heart attack." Soren's expression darkened. When did the reassessment happen? 3 weeks ago. And when did your grandfather die? March 1968. Why? Soren pulled out his phone. No signal, but he had documents saved offline. He scrolled through something, then looked up. I do search and rescue all over this county. I see a lot of property records. 3 weeks ago, there was an inquiry filed with the county clerk about this estate. Someone wanted to know if there were any structures on the property not listed in the official records. Who filed it? Don't know. It was anonymous. But Mr. Merritt, I think someone suspects something. I think someone's been looking for this vault. Merritt's blood ran cold. But how? My grandfather sealed it. No one knew. Clearly someone did. Or they figured it out. Your grandfather was a wealthy man in a small town. People talk, people remember. And after 50+ years, secrets have a way of leaking. They stood in silence, the weight of the situation settling over them like snow. The collection that was supposed to save them had just become a target, and they were two elderly people, isolated and vulnerable, sitting on a fortune they couldn't protect. Help me understand something, Soren said. Why did you open the vault yesterday? After all these years, what changed? We were desperate, out of firewood, out of options. I was looking for anything that would burn. So you weren't looking for treasure? We didn't even know it existed. Soren smiled faintly. That's important. When this comes out, and it will come out, you need to be able to prove you weren't treasure hunting. You were just trying to survive. Will that matter? It might. It shows you have no ulterior motive. You're not con artists or thieves. You're inheritors with a legitimate claim. Merritt looked at the journal still in Soren's hands. My grandfather wrote that this should be revealed when the time is right. I thought he meant when someone worthy found it, but maybe he meant when the world was ready to understand it. Or when you were ready, Soren suggested. Maybe he knew that if you found this when you were young, you'd just sell it. But now, after everything you've been through, you might actually honor his vision. Which was what exactly? That's what we need to figure out. They spent the next hour going through more of the journal, finding clues about Thaddeus's intentions. One passage stood out, written in 1965. I have been approached by museums, by private collectors, by government agencies. They all want to buy the collection. They offer me security, comfort, recognition, but I refuse. This collection was not built to make me famous or wealthy. It was built to preserve beauty in a world that constantly tries to destroy it. When I am gone, I hope whoever inherits this understands. The value is not in selling these pieces to the highest bidder. The value is in making sure they endure, in using them to teach, to inspire, to remind people that some things are worth protecting even when the world says otherwise. He didn't want it sold, Delphine's voice came from the doorway. They spun around. She was leaning against the frame, wrapped in a blanket, her face still pale but her eyes clear. Delphine, you should be resting. Merritt rushed to her side. I'm fine. The medication helped, and I needed to hear this. Soren helped her to the desk chair. She sat down carefully, looking around the vault with wonder. I was half convinced I'd dreamed this, she said. But it's real. It's all real. Yes, ma'am, Soren said gently. Delphine picked up the journal, read the passage Merritt had just found. He wanted it preserved, not sold. He wanted it to mean something. But how? Merritt asked. We can't run a museum. We can barely run our lives. Maybe you don't have to, Soren said. Maybe you create a foundation, a trust, something that protects the collection while using it for good. We don't know how to do that. No, but my grandmother might. She's helped set up arts foundations before, and she's the most trustworthy person I know. Merritt and Delphine looked at each other, having one of those wordless conversations that come from 50 years of marriage. Can she keep a secret? Delphine asked. Better than anyone. Then maybe it's time we brought in some help. Over the next 3 days, while Delphine recovered and the roads slowly cleared, Soren became their lifeline to the outside world. He brought them food, medicine, updates on the weather, but more importantly, he brought his grandmother. Cordelia was 76, sharp as a tack, with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun and eyes that missed nothing. Soren introduced her as a home health aide, just in case anyone was watching the property. But once inside, she moved with purpose, following her grandson down to the vault. Her reaction was everything Merit and Delphine needed to see. She stood frozen in the entrance, one hand pressed to her chest, tears streaming down her face. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Oh my dear God." She moved through the vault like it was sacred ground, touching nothing, just looking, absorbing. When she saw the crate marked with the Goldstein family name, she broke down completely. "I knew the Goldsteins," she said through tears. "I wrote my dissertation on their collection. It was thought to be completely lost. 300 years of Jewish scholarship gone. And here it is, here it is." She turned to Merit and Delphine. "You have no idea what you found. This isn't just art. This is memory. This is proof that beauty survived when evil tried to destroy it." Over the next hours, Cordelia examined piece after piece, her expert eye confirming what the journal claimed. Authentic, valuable, historically significant. She moved with reverence, occasionally stopping to wipe tears, to whisper thanks to a god she thought had forgotten these treasures. Finally, she sat at the desk, looked at the journal, and turned to the elderly couple. "I need to be very frank with you," she said. "What you have here is worth, conservatively, between $200 and $300 million, possibly more. Some of these pieces are one of a kind. Museums around the world would empty their endowments to acquire even a fraction of this collection." Merit felt the room spin. 200 to 300 million. The numbers were incomprehensible. "But," Cordelia continued, "value and worth are not the same thing. Thaddeus understood that. He built this collection not for profit, but for preservation. If you sell it, you'll be wealthy beyond measure, but you'll also destroy what he spent a lifetime creating." "We don't want to sell," Delphine said firmly. "We want to honor what he built. Then you have options. You can donate everything to museums in exchange for a tax write-off and lifetime financial security. You can create a private foundation that manages the collection and generates income through exhibitions, or you can do something more radical." "Like what?" Merit asked. Cordelia smiled. "You could create a new kind of institution, not a museum in the traditional sense, but a living collection, a place where these pieces are used to educate, to inspire, to help communities that have been forgotten, just like this collection was forgotten." "I don't understand." "Thaddeus saved art from people who were desperate during the Depression. He protected heritage from families fleeing genocide. What if this collection could now help people facing similar struggles? What if you used it not to make yourselves rich, but to lift up others?" Delphine's eyes widened. "A foundation that helps people." "Exactly. You could create a rotating exhibition program where museums borrow pieces for free, but must use the admission fees to fund arts education in underserved communities. You could establish scholarships for students studying preservation. You could create grants for families trying to protect their own cultural heritage." Merit looked at his wife. He saw the same thing in her eyes that he felt in his chest: purpose. Not just survival anymore, but meaning. "How would we even start something like that?" he asked. "Carefully," Cordelia said. "First, we need to secure the collection legally, establish your ownership beyond question. Then we build the foundation structure, bring in lawyers, accountants, people who can navigate the complexity. And we need to do it all quietly, before word gets out to the wrong people." "It might be too late for that," Soren interjected. "I told you about the property inquiry, and Mr. Merit mentioned strange calls." Cordelia's expression hardened. Then we move faster. Tomorrow I'll make some calls. I have contacts at major museums, people I trust. We'll need authentication, insurance, security. This vault needs to be sealed and protected until we're ready to reveal it properly. How long will that take? Delphine asked. Weeks, maybe months. Can you keep the secret that long? Merritt thought about 47 years of keeping his head down, of surviving in silence, of being invisible to a world that didn't care. We've kept bigger secrets, he said. But even as he spoke, he felt the weight of what was coming. This discovery would change everything. Their privacy, their safety, their very identity. They would go from being the town's pity case to being its most valuable asset. And not everyone would be happy about it. That night, after Cordelia and Soren left, Merritt and Delphine sat in the vault together. They didn't speak, just held hands, surrounded by the beautiful things Thaddeus had saved. Are you scared? Delphine finally asked. Terrified, Merritt admitted. Me too, but also, for the first time in years, I feel something else. What? She smiled, tears on her cheeks. Hope. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and quiet. But down in the vault, beneath the frozen earth, warmth was spreading. Not the heat of greed or ambition, but something purer, the warmth of purpose, of legacy, of two elderly people who'd been called worthless, discovering they'd been chosen to protect something priceless. And somewhere in that small mountain town, someone else was watching, waiting, planning, because secrets that valuable never stay buried forever, and the real test was just beginning. The morning after Cordelia's first visit, Merritt woke to the sound of engines. Not one, but several. He rolled off the mattress in the kitchen, his joints screaming in protest, and moved to the window. 3 black SUVs sat at the end of their driveway, idling, exhaust rising into the cold air like smoke signals. Men in dark coats stood beside the vehicles, talking, gesturing toward the house. They weren't approaching, just watching, waiting. Delphine, Merritt said quietly, we have company. She joined him at the window, her hand finding his. They watched in silence as one of the men raised binoculars, scanning the property, the house, the garage that peeked out from under melting snow. Who are they? Delphine whispered. I don't know, but they're not here by accident. The men stayed for 20 minutes, then climbed back into their vehicles and drove away slowly, deliberately, like they wanted to be seen, like they were sending a message. Merritt's phone rang. Soren. Mr. Merritt, are you and Delphine okay? We're fine, but there were men outside, 3 SUVs just sitting there. I know. I saw them on my way to check on you. I turned around and followed them into town. They went straight to the county clerk's office. Merritt's stomach dropped. What would they want there? Property records, deeds, permits, anything they can find about your estate. Soren paused. Mr. Merritt, I think you need to get Cordelia back here, today. This is moving faster than we thought. Cordelia arrived within the hour, her usual calm replaced by urgency. She brought with her a man Merritt didn't recognize, late 50s, grey hair, expensive suit that looked out of place in Pine Ridge. This is Lawrence Temple, Cordelia said. He's an attorney specializing in estate law and cultural property. He's also someone I would trust with my life. Lawrence shook their hands with a grip that was firm but not aggressive. His eyes, when he looked at them, held genuine kindness. Mrs. Cordelia has told me about your situation, he said. I want to be very clear from the start. I'm not here to take advantage of you. I'm here to protect you. My fee will be reasonable and we'll put everything in writing. But you need legal protection, and you need it now. They sat at the kitchen table, the same one where Merritt and Delphine had counted pennies and rationed soup for years. Now they were discussing how to protect hundreds of millions of dollars. First things first, Lawrence said, pulling out a folder. We need to establish clear ownership. Your grandfather left the estate to you in his will, correct? Yes, Merritt said. It passed through my father first, but he died in 98. It came to me. And the will made no mention of the vault? None. We didn't even know it existed until 5 days ago. Lawrence made notes. That actually works in your favor. It means the vault and its contents were part of the real property you inherited. Legally, everything in it belongs to you. But we need to document the discovery properly. How? Delphine asked. Photographs, detailed inventory, witness statements. We need to prove that you discovered this collection through legitimate means, not through treasure hunting or trespassing. We can do that, Merritt said. Good. Second issue, those men outside. They concern me. If word has leaked about this collection, you're in potential danger. Not just legally, but physically. You think they'd hurt us? Delphine's voice trembled slightly. I think people have killed for far less than $200 million, Lawrence said bluntly. We need to secure the vault immediately and get you both somewhere safe. We're not leaving, Merritt said firmly. This is our home. Then we bring security to you. I know people, professionals. They can be here by tonight. Cordelia leaned forward. There's something else we need to discuss. Authentication. I've examined maybe 20 pieces so far, and I'm confident in my assessments. But for legal purposes, for insurance, for any future use of the collection, we need official authentication from recognized experts. Won't that mean bringing in more people? Merritt asked. More chances for the secret to get out? Yes, Cordelia admitted. But there's no way around it. We need art historians, conservators, appraisers. We need X-ray analysis, chemical testing, provenance research. Some of these pieces, if they're authentic, have been missing for decades. We need to prove they are what we think they are. And if word gets out during that process? Lawrence interjected. Then we control the narrative. We go public on our terms, not someone else's. We announce the discovery through proper channels, with legal protections already in place. Merritt looked at Delphine. Her face was pale, but her jaw was set with determination. Do what needs to be done, she said. Over the next 2 weeks, the estate transformed from a quiet, dying place into something else entirely. Cordelia brought in a carefully vetted team of experts, each one signing strict non-disclosure agreements. They arrived in unmarked vehicles, worked in the vault with the reverence of archaeologists uncovering a tomb, and left without speaking to anyone in town. A conservator from the Smithsonian spent 3 days examining paintings, using portable X-ray equipment to analyze brushstrokes and underlying sketches. She confirmed what Cordelia suspected. The Vermeer was authentic, one of only 34 known works by the Dutch master. Its value alone, $45 million. A manuscript expert from Yale authenticated the Dickens handwriting, the Jefferson letters, the Gutenberg Bible fragment. Each piece was photographed, measured, catalogued with scientific precision. An antiquities specialist identified the Greek pottery as 5th century BC, museum quality, probably looted from sites during World War II and saved by Thaddeus from the black market. The numbers kept climbing. 50 million, 75 million, 100 million. And still, they weren't halfway through the collection. Merritt watched these experts work, saw the awe in their eyes, heard them whisper to each other about significance and rarity and historical importance. And slowly, he began to understand. This wasn't just wealth. This was heritage, pieces of human creativity and achievement that had survived wars, depressions, genocides, natural disasters, and his grandfather had protected them all. One evening, as the experts packed up for the day, the conservator from the Smithsonian pulled Merritt aside. Mr. Merritt, she said quietly, I've been doing this for 30 years. I've worked in the greatest museums in the world. I've never seen anything like this collection. The breadth, the quality, the condition. Your grandfather was extraordinary. He was a stranger to me, Merritt admitted. I only met him twice. Then maybe you're getting to know him now, through what he saved. That night, Merritt sat in the vault alone, reading more of Thaddeus's journal. He found entries he'd missed before, personal reflections mixed with the inventory lists. One from April 1952. My son visited today with his family. He's embarrassed by this estate, by my eccentricities, as he calls them. He wants me to sell everything, move into a modern house in the city. He doesn't understand that some things are worth more than comfort. I tried to explain about the collection, about why I do this. He looked at me with pity. I see now that he will never understand. And perhaps that's my failure, not his. I have spent so much time preserving beauty that I forgot to share it with the people I love. Merritt felt tears sting his eyes. He understood that regret. He'd spent 47 years in this house, struggling to survive, and he'd barely shared anything with his own children. They'd grown up watching him fail, watching Delphine grow sick, watching dreams collapse. And they'd run, not because they didn't love him, but because they couldn't bear to watch anymore. Would this discovery change that? Or would they see it as just another way their father had kept secrets? He was still sitting there, lost in thought, when Delphine found him. "You've been down here for hours," she said gently. "I'm trying to understand him, Thaddeus, why he did all this." Delphine sat beside him on a crate. "Maybe there's no simple answer. Maybe he was complicated like all of us. He wrote that he failed his son, my father, that he spent so much time preserving beauty he forgot to share it. But he's sharing it now. Through us." Merritt looked at his wife. Despite everything, despite the heart condition and the poverty and the years of struggle, her eyes still held kindness. "What do you want to do with all this?" he asked. "Really, if you could do anything." Delphine thought for a long moment. "I want to make sure people know the stories. Not just the value of the pieces, but the stories behind them. The Harrison family who sold their collection to start over, the Goldstein family who died but whose heritage survived, all the people Thaddeus helped when no one else would. Cordelia suggested we create a foundation, use the collection to help others. Then that's what we should do. It won't be easy. There will be legal battles probably. People claiming they deserve a share. The government might get involved." "Let them come," Delphine said with surprising fierceness. "We didn't find this to make ourselves comfortable. We found it to finish what Thaddeus started." The next morning brought trouble in a form neither of them expected. A lawyer arrived at their door, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and an expensive briefcase. "Mr. and Mrs. Merritt," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "My name is Helen Cascaro. I represent the estate of Bernard Whitaker, Thaddeus Whitaker's brother." Merritt's blood went cold. Thaddeus had a brother. Yes, Bernard died in 2003, but his descendants are very much alive, and they believe they have a claim to any assets that belong to Thaddeus, including anything found on this property. "That's not how inheritance works," Merritt said. "Perhaps, but my clients are prepared to file suit. They believe Thaddeus acquired much of his collection through questionable means, possibly even theft. They want a full accounting and a fair division of assets." Delphine stepped forward. "We haven't even made the discovery public yet. How do your clients know about it?" Helen's smile widened. "Word travels, Mrs. Merritt, especially in a small town where suddenly there are experts coming and going, security guards appearing, very unusual activity for a supposedly worthless estate." "We're not discussing this without our attorney present," Merritt said. "Of course. Have your attorney call me." Helen handed him a business card. "But Mr. Merritt, understand this. My clients are prepared to tie this up in court for years if necessary. They have resources, time, patience. Do you?" She left, her threat hanging in the air like smoke. Merritt immediately called Lawrence. The attorney arrived within 2 hours, his face grim. "I did some research," Lawrence said. Bernard Whitaker was Thaddeus's younger brother. They had a falling out in the 30s over business dealings. Bernard moved to California, made his own fortune, and they never reconciled. He died 23 years ago. So his descendants think they deserve half of everything? Delphine asked. They'll claim that, yes. It's a nuisance suit, probably. They can't actually prove Thaddeus stole anything or that they have any legal claim, but they can make your lives hell while we fight it out in court. Unless we settle, Merritt said quietly. Unless you settle, which means giving them money or pieces from the collection. We're not doing that, Delphine said firmly. Thaddeus left this to Merritt. He sealed the vault and trusted it would be found by the right person. We're not handing it over to people who are just looking for a payday. Lawrence nodded approvingly. Then we fight. But you need to know, this is just the beginning. Once word spreads, and it will spread, there will be others, distant relatives, former business partners, people claiming Thaddeus promised them things, treasure hunters who'll say they had information about the vault first. It's going to get ugly. How do we protect ourselves? Merritt asked. We go public, now, before anyone else can control the narrative. We announce the discovery through a major news outlet with full documentation, with legal protections already in place. We show the world that this collection has been properly inherited and will be properly managed. Cordelia, who had been sitting quietly, spoke up. I have a contact at the New York Times, Jessica Moreno. She specializes in art world stories. She's fair, thorough, and she won't sensationalize. If we give her the exclusive, she'll tell the story right. What happens next will turn this discovery into a fight for survival, reveal enemies hiding in plain sight, and force Merritt and Delphine to risk everything they've found to protect what they believe in. Stay tuned to see what happens next. If you're enjoying the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more. How quickly can she get here? Lawrence asked. If I call today, she could be here by tomorrow. Merritt looked at Delphine. This was it, the moment of no return. Once they went public, their lives would never be private again. They'd be scrutinized, investigated, celebrated, and attacked. The quiet struggle they'd endured for decades would be replaced by a different kind of battle entirely. Do it, Delphine said. Call her. Jessica Moreno arrived 36 hours later with a photographer and a fact-checker. She was younger than Merritt expected, maybe 40, with dark hair pulled back and eyes that absorbed everything. She shook their hands with genuine warmth. Mr. and Mrs. Merritt, thank you for trusting me with this story. Cordelia tells me it's extraordinary. That's one word for it, Merritt said. They led her down to the vault. Her reaction was perfect, genuine shock, followed by professional composure, followed by an almost childlike wonder. May I? She asked, gesturing toward the open crates. Please. Jessica spent 4 hours in the vault, taking notes, asking questions, examining pieces with the photographer. She listened as Merritt and Delphine told the story of their discovery, of Thaddeus's journal, of the slow revelation that they'd been living above a fortune for nearly 5 decades. This is, without question, one of the most significant private collections I've ever encountered, Jessica said. The story is incredible, but I need to ask some hard questions. Go ahead, Merritt said. How can you prove you didn't know about this vault before? How can you prove this isn't some elaborate scheme? Lawrence stepped forward. We have documentation. The emergency call records from when Mrs. Merritt collapsed, the paramedics report, photographs time-stamped from the day of discovery. Witness statements from experts who can verify the vault had been sealed for decades. And what about Thaddeus? How did he acquire all this? Some of these pieces have questionable provenance. Cordelia answered. I've been researching that. Thaddeus kept meticulous records. He paid fair prices during the Depression, often above market value. During the war, he worked with underground networks to smuggle art out of Nazi-occupied territory. He saved these pieces, he didn't steal them. Can you prove that? Yes, the journal contains names, dates, transactions. We're tracking down descendants of the families he worked with. So far, everyone we've found has confirmed his story. Jessica nodded, making notes. And what are you planning to do with the collection? Merritt and Delphine looked at each other. They'd discussed this endlessly over the past week, lying awake at night, weighing options. We're creating a foundation, Delphine said, the Thaddeus Whitaker Memorial Foundation. It will manage the collection, allow museums to borrow pieces for free, and use any revenue to fund arts education in underserved communities. You're not selling? No, Merritt said firmly. Thaddeus didn't build this to make anyone rich. He built it to preserve beauty and help people. We're going to honor that. Jessica studied them for a long moment. You realize you could sell a single piece from this collection and live comfortably for the rest of your lives. You could solve all your financial problems. We could, Delphine agreed. But then what? We'd be comfortable and the collection would be scattered. Thaddeus's vision would be destroyed. We didn't survive 47 years of poverty just to cash out now. The article ran 3 days later on the front page of the arts section with a continuation online. The headline read, Hidden Fortune, Elderly Couple Discovers $275 million Art Collection Beneath Crumbling Colorado Estate. The story was perfect. Jessica had captured everything. The struggle, the discovery, the journal entries, Thaddeus's vision, and Merritt and Delphine's decision to create a foundation rather than sell. She included photographs of select pieces, interviews with authentication experts, and a moving portrait of two people who'd been called worthless, discovering they were guardians of something priceless. The response was immediate and overwhelming. By noon, their phone was ringing constantly. News outlets from around the world requesting interviews, museums expressing interest in borrowing pieces, lawyers offering services, security companies proposing protection plans, but also threats. Anonymous emails claiming the collection was stolen, letters demanding payment for information about Thaddeus's crimes, calls from people insisting they were the rightful heirs, and the men in black SUVs returned. This time, there were 5 vehicles. They parked at the property line and didn't leave. Lawrence filed for an emergency restraining order. The judge granted it, forcing the vehicles to stay at least 500 feet from the estate, but everyone knew it was a temporary measure. They're waiting for something, Soren said. He'd taken a leave from his paramedic work to help coordinate security. They think if they pressure you enough, you'll make a mistake. Who are they? Merritt asked. We're working on finding out. Lawrence has investigators tracking the vehicle registrations, but they're using shell companies, layers of protection. That night, someone tried to break into the vault. The new security system caught them on camera, a figure in dark clothing attempting to bypass the steel door. The alarms went off, security responded, and the intruder fled. But the message was clear. Someone wanted access and didn't care about legality. The next morning, Merritt found graffiti spray-painted on the side of the garage. Give it back. Delphine stood beside him, staring at the words. Her hands trembled. Maybe they're right, she whispered. Maybe we should give it back. To who? We inherited this legally. But people are angry. People think we don't deserve it. Merritt took her hands. Listen to me. We spent our entire lives being told we weren't enough. Not smart enough, not successful enough, not worthy enough. And we believed it. We accepted it. But this collection, Thaddeus left it for us. Not because we were perfect, but because we were the ones who stayed, who endured, who understood what it meant to protect something even when the world said it was worthless. But what if we can't protect it? What if they... Then we fail trying. But we don't give up. Not now. Cordelia arrived with more news. I've been contacted by representatives from 3 major museums. The Met, the Louvre, the British Museum. They're all interested in being the first to host pieces from the collection. That's good, right? Delphine asked. Yes and no. It means legitimacy, but it also means pressure. They're offering significant amounts of money for permanent acquisition of certain pieces. We're not selling to them either, Merritt said. I know, but they're persistent, and they have influence. They can make things difficult if we refuse them. Lawrence joined them. We have a bigger problem. Helen Cascaro, the lawyer for Bernard's descendants, has filed a formal lawsuit. They're claiming that half the collection was acquired using Bernard's money, therefore half belongs to his estate. That's insane, Merritt said. Bernard and Thaddeus had a falling out in the 30s. They're arguing that the falling out happened because Thaddeus cheated Bernard in a business deal. They claim he used Bernard's investment money to acquire the initial pieces of the collection. Can they prove that? No, but they don't have to prove it to file suit. And the suit will freeze everything until it's resolved. You won't be able to loan pieces, create the foundation, or do anything with the collection until the court makes a ruling. How long will that take? Could be years. Merritt felt the walls closing in. They'd done everything right, gone public properly, hired good lawyers, tried to honor Thaddeus's vision, and still they were being attacked from every angle. That evening he sat alone in the vault, the journal open in front of him. He turned to one of the last entries, written just days before Thaddeus died. I know this will be difficult for whoever finds it. The world does not like it when ordinary people possess extraordinary things. They will question your right, your motives, your worth. They will try to take it from you through legal means, through pressure, through force. But remember, you found this because you were meant to. Trust that. Trust yourself. And when it gets hard, remember why these things were saved in the first place. Not for profit, not for glory, but because beauty deserves to exist, even in a world that tries to destroy it. Merritt closed the journal and looked around at the crates, the paintings, the artifacts. Each one represented someone's story, someone's struggle, someone's attempt to create something meaningful in a difficult world. He thought about the Harrison family, selling their collection to start over, the Goldstein family, sending their heritage to safety before they were murdered, all the desperate people during the Depression who trusted Thaddeus to preserve what they could no longer protect. And he realized something. This collection wasn't just about the past. It was about the present, about him and Delphine, two people who'd been dismissed and forgotten, now being given a chance to protect something important. He climbed the stairs to find Delphine in the kitchen. She was on the phone with one of their children, their daughter Melanie, trying to explain what was happening. No, we're not in danger. Yes, we have security. No, we're not selling anything. Because, Mel, this is important. This is bigger than us. A pause. I know you don't understand, but maybe you don't have to. Maybe you just have to trust that your father and I know what we're doing. She hung up, tears in her eyes. They think we're crazy, she said. They think we should sell everything and move into assisted living. Maybe we are crazy, Merritt said gently. But we're crazy together. Delphine smiled despite the tears. Thaddeus wrote that letter knowing it would be hard. He knew whoever found this would face exactly what we're facing now. And he trusted we'd have the strength to handle it. Do we? Merritt pulled her close. We survived 47 years in this house. We survived poverty, sickness, shame, and snow up to the windows. We can survive this too. Outside, the black SUVs still waited. Inside, two elderly people held each other, drawing strength from 50 years of love and shared struggle. The collection in the basement represented hundreds of millions of dollars. But what Merritt and Delphine had together, what they'd built through decades of hardship, was worth more than any painting or sculpture. Because they'd learned something Thaddeus knew all along. The most valuable things in life aren't the ones you can sell. They're the ones you protect, even when the whole world tells you they're worthless. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Cordelia had been researching Thaddeus's business records, trying to find proof that Bernard's descendants had no claim to the collection. What she found instead was explosive. Merritt, Delphine, you need to see this, she said, arriving at the estate with a box of documents. Lawrence was with her, his expression grim. They spread papers across the kitchen table, Bank records, letters, legal documents, all dating from the 1930s. Bernard Whitaker did invest money with Thaddeus, Cordelia explained. $50,000 in 1932. But look at this. She pointed to a contract. The investment was for timber operations, not art acquisition. And here, she pulled out a bank statement. Thaddeus paid Bernard back in full, with interest, in 1934. There's even a signed receipt acknowledging full repayment and releasing all claims. So they have no case, Merritt said. Better than that, Lawrence added. We found something else, those black SUVs that have been watching the property. We traced the shell companies back to their source. Helen Cascaro, the lawyer representing Bernard's descendants, she's not just their attorney. She's married to one of them, and they're not from Bernard's legitimate children. They're from a second family he had in Nevada, never legally recognized. So they're not even real heirs, Delphine said. Correct. And here's the kicker. We found emails between Cascaro and a private collector. They were planning to pressure you into selling, then buy pieces through intermediaries at below market value. This was never about inheritance, it was about theft. Merritt felt rage building in his chest. They tried to scare two old people into giving up a fortune. Yes, but now we have proof. I'm filing a motion to dismiss their suit with prejudice and requesting sanctions for fraud. I'm also contacting the state bar about Cascaro's conduct. Will it work? It should. But here's what I need from you. We need to go fully public, not just an article, a press conference. We announce the foundation, show the evidence of fraud, and make it clear that you're not victims who can be bullied. You're guardians of something important. When? Merritt asked. 3 days. I'll coordinate with major news outlets. We'll hold it here at the estate. Let people see where you've lived, what you've endured. Make it impossible for anyone to claim you're opportunists. Those 3 days were chaos. Contractors arrived to make the estate presentable, not fancy, but safe. They repaired the front steps, cleared snow from the driveway, fixed the worst of the broken windows. Soren coordinated security, establishing a perimeter, screening everyone who entered. Cordelia and her team prepared displays, carefully selected pieces that could be photographed without compromising the full collection. They set up the library as a viewing room, arranged the Vermeer, a Monet, several rare manuscripts, and artifacts from the Goldstein collection. And Merritt and Delphine prepared themselves. They practiced answering questions, reviewed the timeline of their discovery, went over the legal documents until they knew them by heart. The night before the press conference, Merritt couldn't sleep. He wandered down to the vault, needing the quiet, the sense of Thaddeus's presence that he always felt there. He found Delphine already sitting at the desk, reading the journal. Couldn't sleep either, he asked. Too much thinking. She looked up at him. Are we doing the right thing? Standing up there tomorrow, making ourselves targets? I don't know, but I know hiding didn't work. Letting people intimidate us didn't work. Maybe it's time we stopped apologizing for surviving. She nodded slowly. I've been reading more of his entries. Listen to this one from August 1946. The war is over. The world is trying to rebuild. I received word today that the Goldstein family, all 17 members, perished in the camps. Only their heritage survives, locked in my vault. I weep for them, for all of them. But I also make this vow. Their memory will not die in darkness. Someday, when the world is ready, when someone brave enough comes along, these pieces will tell their story, and the world will remember that beauty survived when evil tried to destroy it. Merritt felt tears sting his eyes. He was waiting for us, all along. Or people like us. People who understood loss, who knew what it meant to endure. They sat together in the quiet, drawing strength from each other and from the walls around them filled with rescued beauty. Tomorrow they would face cameras and questions and judgment, but tonight they were just two people who had stumbled into something greater than themselves and chosen to protect it. The press conference was scheduled for 10 a.m. by 9. The driveway was packed with news vans. Satellite trucks lined the road. Reporters and photographers gathered on the front lawn, their breath rising in the cold February air. Merritt and Delphine stood inside, watching through the window. Both wore their best clothes, which weren't very good, but Cordelia had insisted they look like themselves, not like wealthy collectors. "You ready?" Lawrence asked. "No," Merritt admitted, "but let's do it anyway." They stepped onto the front porch. The crowd surged forward, cameras flashing, voices shouting questions. Lawrence held up his hand for silence. "Thank you all for coming. I'm Lawrence Temple, attorney for Merritt and Delphine Whitaker. My clients will make a brief statement, then take limited questions. Please be respectful." He stepped aside. Merritt moved to the microphone they'd set up, Delphine beside him, her hand in his. "My name is Merritt Whitaker," he began, his voice shaking slightly. "This is my wife, Delphine. We've lived in this house for 47 years. For most of that time we've been poor, struggling to pay property taxes on an estate the county valued at $12,000, eating soup and burning furniture to stay warm. We're not rich people. We're not sophisticated people. We're just two old folks trying to survive in a dying town." Cameras clicked furiously. Reporters scribbled notes. "The collection has been valued at approximately $275 million, Merritt continued. "We could sell it, become wealthy beyond anything we ever imagined. But we're not going to do that. Because our grandfather didn't build this collection for profit. He built it to preserve beauty in a world that tried to destroy it. And we're going to honor that vision." Delphine stepped forward, her voice clearer than Merritt expected. "We're establishing the Thaddeus Whitaker Memorial Foundation. It will manage the collection and allow museums around the world to borrow pieces for free. The only requirement is that admission fees be used to fund arts education in underserved communities. We're also creating scholarship programs for students studying preservation and grants for families trying to protect their own cultural heritage." "Why?" someone shouted from the crowd. Delphine smiled. "Because Thaddeus helped desperate people during the Depression. He saved heritage from families fleeing genocide. He understood that some things are worth more than money. And after spending nearly 50 years being told we were worthless for staying in this worthless house, we finally understand what he knew all along. Worth isn't about what you own, it's about what you protect for others." The questions came rapid fire after that. How did they discover the vault? Were the pieces authenticated? What about the lawsuit from Bernard's descendants? Were they afraid of being robbed? Lawrence fielded most of the technical questions, but Merritt answered the personal ones honestly. Yes, they were afraid. Yes, people had threatened them. Yes, they'd considered giving up, but they'd survived too much to quit now. Then a reporter from the local Pine Ridge Gazette asked the question that changed everything. "Mr. Whitaker, people in town have called you fools for years, for staying in this house, for living in poverty when you could have moved somewhere easier. Now you're sitting on a fortune. Do you feel vindicated?" Merritt looked at Delphine. She nodded, encouraging him to speak the truth. "No," he said quietly. "I don't feel vindicated. I feel sad. Sad that it took a fortune for people to think we might have been worth paying attention to all along. My wife and I, we didn't change. We're the same people we were a month ago, but now folks treat us differently because of what we found, not who we are. And that's the real tragedy. Not that we were poor, but that being poor made us invisible." The crowd went silent. Several reporters looked down, uncomfortable. "But here's what I hope," Merritt continued, his voice growing stronger. "I hope this collection reminds people that worth isn't visible, it's hidden, waiting to be discovered, and sometimes the things and people the world calls worthless are actually protecting something priceless." Old man Ritchie from the general store stood there with a handmade sign. "We're sorry we didn't see you." Sarah Mitchell, who ran the pharmacy where Delphine bought her medications, held flowers. One by one, townspeople who'd whispered and pitied and dismissed them for years came to bear witness, not to the fortune, but to the apology they owed. Merritt and Delphine walked down to meet them, security hovering nervously. "We're sorry," Sarah said, tears running down her face. "We should have helped you. We should have seen past the house and the poverty and recognized what you were. Good people doing their best." "We survived," Delphine said gently. "That's what matters." "No," Richie interjected. "You did more than survive. You endured with grace. Never complained, never begged, never stopped being kind, even when the world wasn't kind to you. You showed us what dignity looks like, and we're ashamed we didn't recognize it sooner." Over the next week, something remarkable happened. Pine Ridge transformed. People who'd ignored the Whitakers for years suddenly wanted to be part of their story. The town council held an emergency meeting and voted unanimously to support the foundation. Local businesses offered donations. The high school art teacher proposed a partnership for student programs. But most importantly, the men in black SUVs disappeared. Lawrence's evidence of fraud had worked. The lawsuit was dismissed with sanctions. Helen Cascaro was under investigation by the state bar, and the fake heirs had retreated, their scheme exposed. Merritt and Delphine could finally breathe. Cordelia brought more good news. "I've been contacted by the directors of 12 major museums. They all want to be part of the Foundation's rotating exhibition program. The Met is offering to host the inaugural exhibition. They're proposing a 6-month show titled Beauty Endures, the Thaddeus Whitaker Collection." "6 months in New York?" Delphine asked. "With full security, insurance, conservation support, and here's the best part. They're estimating ticket sales could generate over $2 million for arts education grants." Merritt did the math in his head. $2 million. More money than he'd earned in his entire working life. All going to help kids learn about art, about creativity, about beauty. "When would it start?" he asked. "This fall. That gives us time to complete authentication, arrange transport, develop the educational programming. It also gives you time to establish the foundation legally and recover from all this chaos." "What about us?" Delphine asked quietly. "Where do we fit in all this?" Cordelia smiled warmly. "Wherever you want. You're the founders, the guardians. This doesn't work without you." But integrating into their new reality proved challenging. Suddenly they had money for the first time in decades. The foundation provided them with a modest salary as administrators, enough for Delphine's medications, for heat, for food that wasn't soup. Their children came to visit, all 3 of them arriving separately, each carrying guilt and confusion. Their son Marcus arrived first, a software engineer from Seattle who hadn't been home in 6 years. "Dad," he said, standing awkwardly in the kitchen, "I don't know what to say. All those years, we thought you were being stubborn, staying in this house for pride. We didn't know about the vault." "We didn't either," Merritt said. "But you stayed anyway, even when it was hard, even when we begged you to leave. This was our home. Sometimes you hold on to things not because they make sense, but because letting go feels like giving up." Marcus looked around the kitchen, seeing it differently now. "You weren't giving up. You were waiting. We were surviving. The waiting part was your grandfather's idea." Their daughter Melanie came next, flying in from Houston with her husband and 2 teenagers. She cried when she saw the vault, not from joy at the wealth, but from understanding what her parents had lived above all these years. "You could have been comfortable," she whispered, "if you'd just found this sooner." "Maybe," Delphine said, "but we wouldn't have been ready. We needed those 47 years to understand what matters." "Poverty? Struggle?" "No, sweetheart. Endurance, faith, the knowledge that worth doesn't come from what you possess, but from what you protect." Their youngest son, Thomas, a teacher in Portland, stayed the longest. He helped catalog pieces, learned about the foundation, asked questions about Thaddeus's vision. "You're going to change lives with this," he said one evening. "Kids who think art is only for rich people, communities that have been ignored, families like the Goldsteins whose stories deserve to be remembered." "That's the hope," Merritt said. "I'm proud of you, both of you, not because you found a fortune, but because you chose to use it the right way." Spring came to Pine Ridge slowly, the snow melting to reveal the land beneath. The estate, which had looked dead for so long, began to show signs of life. Contractors finished essential repairs. The foundation hired staff, including Soren as Director of Community Outreach and Cordelia as Chief Curator. They transformed one wing of the mansion into offices and a small museum space where rotating selections from the collection could be displayed for local visitors. School groups started coming, children pressing their faces against climate-controlled cases, seeing beauty many had never imagined existed. Merritt and Delphine watched it all with quiet wonder. The house that had been their burden for decades had become their purpose. Delphine's health improved dramatically with proper medication and less stress. The blue tinge left her lips, her breathing steadied. She started taking walks around the property, something she hadn't had the strength to do in years. One afternoon she found Merritt in the vault, reading the journal as he often did now. "What are you looking for?" she asked. "I don't know. Answers, maybe. Understanding." About Thaddeus? About why us? Why did he build this vault and seal it, trusting someone would find it? Why not just donate everything to museums while he was alive and get recognition? Delphine sat beside him. Maybe recognition wasn't what he wanted. Then what? Legacy. Not his name in a museum plaque, but his values continuing after he was gone. If he'd donated everything himself, it would have been his gift. But by hiding it, by trusting it would be found by someone who needed it, he made it their gift too. Merritt thought about that. So we're not just protecting his collection, we're fulfilling his purpose. Exactly. He turned to the back of the journal, to pages he'd read dozens of times. But this time, something caught his eye. The binding was slightly loose, as if pages had been added later. He carefully pried it open and found 2 sheets of paper, folded and inserted, the handwriting shaky, clearly written when Thaddeus was dying. "Delphine, look at this!" She leaned in as he unfolded the pages. They were dated March 20th, 1968, 5 days before Thaddeus died. The letter read, "To whoever finds this final message, if you have discovered the vault, if you have read my journals, if you have seen what I built, then you know the story of preservation. But there is one more truth I must share. I did not build this collection because I was a great man. I built it because I was a broken one. My wife died young. My son and I grew apart. I buried myself in acquisition and preservation because I did not know how to preserve the relationships that mattered most. I saved beauty from the world, but could not save my own family from my neglect. If you have found this, you are probably someone I failed to connect with in life. Perhaps my son, though I doubt he will look. Perhaps my grandson, whom I barely knew. Whoever you are, please understand, this collection is my apology. My attempt to leave something good behind after a life spent prioritizing objects over people. Use it better than I did. Let it bring people together, not drive them apart. Let it create community, not isolation. And please forgive an old man who learned too late that the most valuable things cannot be locked in vaults. They must be shared while we still have time." Merritt's hands shook as he read. Tears blurred his vision. "He knew," he whispered. "He knew he'd failed as a father and grandfather. This whole collection, it wasn't just about saving art. It was about trying to make amends." Delphine wiped her own tears. "And now you're using it to do exactly what he asked, bringing people together, creating community. Do you think he'd be proud? I think he's finally at peace." The inaugural gala for the Thaddeus Whitaker Memorial Foundation was held on a warm June evening. The estate had been transformed. lights strung through the trees, the front lawn manicured. The mansion itself, while still showing its age, was clean, safe, welcoming. Over 200 people attended: museum directors, art historians, journalists, donors, but also townspeople, students, families whose heritage Thaddeus had helped preserve decades ago. A woman in her 80s approached Merritt with tears in her eyes. "My grandmother was Sarah Harrison," she said. "She sold her art collection to Thaddeus Whitaker in 1934. Merritt's breath caught. "The Harrison collection. It's in the vault." "I know. When I saw the news, I had to come. My grandmother used to tell me that a kind man bought their paintings when they were desperate, that he paid them more than the bank offered and promised the art would be preserved. She said he gave them hope when they had none." "What happened to your family?" "They moved to California, started over. My grandfather worked in the oil fields. My grandmother taught piano. They survived because of what Thaddeus paid them. And now you're using their paintings to help other desperate families. It's beautiful." She handed Merritt an old photograph. Sarah Harrison standing with Thaddeus in front of the estate, 1934 written on the back. "Keep it," she said. "Add it to the archive. Let people know the stories don't end with acquisition. They continue through the lives that were saved." Throughout the evening, more stories emerged. A man whose Jewish grandparents had worked with Thaddeus to smuggle their Torah out of Prague. A woman whose great-uncle sold a sculpture to Thaddeus during the Depression and used the money to keep his farm. Each one a thread in the tapestry Thaddeus had woven. Merritt stood on the front steps as the sun set, watching people mingle, watching community form around beauty. Delphine joined him, slipping her hand into his. "We did it," she said softly. "We're just getting started." "No, I mean we survived. We endured. We made it through to the other side." Merritt pulled her close. "I love you for staying with me through all of it. Where else would I go? You're my home, not this house. You." They stood together as the light faded. Two people who'd spent nearly 50 years being told they didn't matter, now surrounded by evidence that they did. Not because of what they'd found, but because of what they'd chosen to do with it. 6 months later, the Met exhibition opened to record crowds. Merritt and Delphine attended the opening night, overwhelmed by the grandeur, the attention, the validation. They stood in front of the Vermeer, the first piece they'd unwrapped, and marveled at how far they'd come. But what moved them most wasn't the art. It was the children. School groups brought in through the Foundation's free admission program. Kids from the Bronx and Queens and Harlem who'd never been to a museum before, seeing beauty that had been hidden for decades, learning that it had been preserved by people who cared. One little girl, maybe 8 years old, stood transfixed before a painting of a mother and child. "Is it real?" she asked her teacher. "Yes, sweetheart, it's very real." "Who made it?" "A woman named Mary Cassatt, over 100 years ago." The girl reached out tentatively, not quite touching the protective glass. "It's so pretty. I want to make pretty things too." Delphine heard the exchange and felt tears well up. This was what Thaddeus had wanted. Not ownership, but inspiration. Not possession, but connection. Over the next year, the Foundation grew beyond anything they'd imagined. Museums in Paris, London, Tokyo, Sydney all requested pieces. The rotating exhibition program generated millions for arts education. Scholarship recipients sent letters of gratitude. Communities that had lost funding for arts programs found new hope. And Pine Ridge transformed. The dying town became a destination. The Foundation brought jobs, tourists, revenue. Young people started returning. New businesses opened. The high school created an arts magnet program. What had been a place people left became a place they came to. Merritt and Delphine remained at the heart of it, not as wealthy benefactors, but as guardians. They gave talks to school groups, sharing Thaddeus's story, explaining that beauty is worth protecting even when the world says otherwise. On their 52nd wedding anniversary, they held a small ceremony in the vault. Their children and grandchildren attended, seeing for the first time the space that had changed everything. Thomas, their teacher's son, read from Thaddeus's journal. Marcus spoke about his regret for not understanding sooner. Melanie simply hugged them both and said, "Thank you for showing us what endurance looks like." But the moment Merritt treasured most came later, after everyone had left. He and Delphine sat alone in the vault, surrounded by the collection that had waited so long to be found. "Do you ever think about what our lives would have been if we'd never found this?" Delphine asked. "Sometimes. We probably would have lost the house eventually, ended up in some assisted living facility, died unknown and unmourned." "Would that have been so bad?" Merritt thought carefully. "Yes, not because we would have died poor, but because we would have died thinking we'd failed, thinking our 47 years here had been wasted. And now? Now I know they weren't. Every cold winter, every empty pantry, every moment we wanted to give up but didn't, it was preparing us for this. Teaching us what Thaddeus knew. That worth doesn't come from comfort. It comes from commitment." Delphine smiled. "We were worth something all along. We just couldn't see it. Neither could the world, but that didn't make it less true." They sat in comfortable silence, the climate control humming softly, the art surrounding them like a promise kept. They had started as two struggling people, dismissed and forgotten. They had endured poverty, illness, mockery, and doubt. And when the moment came, when the vault opened and fortune revealed itself, they had made the choice that mattered. Not to grasp, but to share. Not to hoard, but to honor. Not to profit, but to protect. Anyone can discover treasure if they're lucky enough to stumble across it. But it takes something deeper to recognize that the real treasure isn't what you find. It's who you become by protecting it. As the seasons turned and years passed, the foundation flourished. The collection that had been buried for decades now touched millions of lives. Children who'd never seen original art stood before masterpieces. Scholars gained access to lost manuscripts. Families learned their ancestors' stories hadn't been forgotten. And in Pine Ridge, in the stone mansion on the hill that everyone had called cursed, two elderly people lived out their days, not in the poverty they'd known, but in the purpose they'd discovered. They had heat now, medication, food, comfort, but those things, while welcome, weren't what gave their lives meaning. What mattered was knowing that every painting that traveled to a museum, every scholarship awarded, every child inspired, was part of a legacy they'd chosen to protect rather than sell. Merritt Whittaker had inherited a worthless estate and discovered it contained priceless treasure. But the real discovery wasn't the art. It was understanding that he and Delphine had always been priceless too. The world just hadn't known where to look, because sometimes the greatest fortunes are hidden beneath the deepest snow, waiting for the right people to dig them out. And sometimes those people aren't the rich or the powerful or the sophisticated. Sometimes they're just two old souls who refused to give up, who endured when quitting would have been easier, who understood that worth has nothing to do with what the world can see and everything to do with what you choose to protect. The end. Up next, two more powerful stories are waiting for you. Click to discover them now. And don't forget to hit subscribe if you believe that sometimes what the world abandons is exactly what we're meant to find.